It is now time for another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the man who's Minoru Suzuki's personal barber, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome once again to another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasters stream. Follow, subscribe, do what you gotta do. Keep following and listen to this podcast. If you happen to be listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. Well, the series on tape trading was a bigger success than I thought it was going to be. Thank you all for listening to the last 2 weeks of a two-part series of tape trading memories, which is familiarizing me with the territories and the indie scene, and pretty much helped shape my fandom to this very day. This week, however, we're going all the way back to 1992, November 14.92 to be exact. And what would be the final episode, at least for over 13 years, the final episode of Saturday night's main event. All three titles were on the line, including quite a historical title change. Before we get to that, I'm going to give a quick plug, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow us on social media. You also follow on Twitter, on Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook. And, of course, we are on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast here on YouTube, scroll above the video screen. You will see, of course, a link to Pro Wrestling Ontario. After the podcast is over, hit that link, subscribe, watch our videos, which includes complete matches, promos, the backstage shenanigans of Foundation, complete shows, including both Iron Cup tournaments. That's Pro Wrestling Ontario. All right, and now on with the show. Well, as I mentioned before in my very first episode of my podcast, which of course you can find in the archives, when I attended a WWF Superstars taping at Cops Coliseum here in my hometown of Hamilton, and the times were changing for the World Wrestling Federation. And I recently did a watch-along of an episode of Superstars that took place just 2 weeks before this with my friend Mike Forte. And I'm going to post that. I'm delayed in editing that, sadly, due to a lot of things happening this week. I'm looking at new apartments and whatnot, so bear with me. But either way, that'll be a nice companion to this. So again, if you're on my YouTube channel, check that out in the next couple days or so. So basically, the Saturday night's main event came on November 14th, 1992 was the date. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to begin further back. Now, SummerSlam, we're going to end with SummerSlam 1992 here, leading into the Saturday night's main event for a bit. After SummerSlam 92, I'm going into grade 4 at this point. And I still, I mentioned my friend Sandra, who I mentioned her on the podcast, where I believe I mentioned her in that first episode. Her and my frenemy Chad, as well as my frenemy Ricky, I had a lot of those. They bully me sometimes and be my buddy the next day. I don't know. But they were still all enjoying wrestling. Wrestling's mainstream popularity, of course, was fading at this point. And it was around this time that I realized that even 2 years prior in grade 2, more people were talking about wrestling than people were in grade 4. Now, I didn't really take that to mean too much, except realizing that a couple friends who used to watch a lot a year or so prior didn't anymore. So I'm thinking to myself, why? One person I remember saying to me is that, oh, Hulk Hogan's gone. Fair point. And much to my surprise, however, as time went on, Ric Flair became the WWF champion for a second time. Again, I hated Ric Flair with a passion. And I even said, I'm like, why is he champion again? I didn't cry about it, but I was upset. I love the Macho Man at that point. And I'm thinking, great, now we got to sit through, and I actually predicted this. Boy, was I wrong. I got to sit all the way through WrestleMania 9 and watch Ric Flair as a champion. I was way off, to say the least. Now, that was a surprise enough, but at least the next surprise I get would be, well, even better. So, as September went on, I'm adjusting to grade 4. I had this nasty teacher. Her name was Miss Barton. I don't know if she's still with us or not. She was older back then, so I don't know. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but either way, I won't drag her name to the mud too much for the sake if she has passed. But I will say this though, like, and again, I'm talking in the context of the time it happened. So, um, I had anxiety going to school every day because of this teacher. For some reason, she liked to center me out, and I wasn't even her worst student. Grades wise, I was mediocre, maybe, was not the worst. Behavior wise, not the most well behaved that way in terms of the worst I did was talk in class sometimes. So again, I was not exactly the bad kid in class either, so I never understood that. But either way, wrestling was still my escape every weekend. There was a show coming up the day after Thanksgiving. Or no, sorry, it was actually 2 days after Thanksgiving. It was on October 14th, 1992. It was a house show at Cops. I had such fun at the TV taping, I wanted to go again. You notice a recurring theme in these podcasts. I just desperately want to go to shows that are in my hometown. So, of course, I dropped the subtle hints to my dad, saying that because the main event was supposed to be Ric Flair defending his championship against the Ultimate Warrior. Now, there have been a lot of house show title changes in the last year at that point. So I'm thinking, wow, we might see a title change here. So I was hoping I could go. So again, I'm dropping those not so subtle hints as a 9-year-old. Dad's like, oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, so the day came. I wasn't at the show, to say the least. So once again, of course, I bring it up to my dad. Now I can't remember why. It was midweek, but we were at my uncle's for some reason. And as we're getting ready to go, I say, yeah, Ultimate Warrior's fighting for the title tonight against Ric Flair. And my dad's like, Ric Flair's not the champion. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, Bret Hart is. Like, what? He said, yeah, Bret Hart's the champion. I thought he was like playing a joke on me because he knew how much I love Bret Hart. I didn't know. When did he do that? I said, a couple days ago. He said, it was in the newspaper and everything. Apparently, it was in the sports section of the Hamilton Spectator that Bret Hart had become the WWF champion, probably to try to hype up the show. Because Bret was supposed to face Nails, and he ended up doing so. Wait, he's really the champion? I'm almost not believing it. And when I watched now I was anxious to watch Superstars more than ever that weekend. I made sure I was up at like as early as I could be, but still anxious waiting for Superstars to start. And lo and behold, there's the announcement: Bret Hart is going to be a champion. I started marking out right there on the couch. It was insane. It was we're at our old place on Clyde Street, where for you Hamiltonians listening is between Wentworth. It's right near Wentworth between Cannon and Barton. Well, we could access either street, but we live like almost right in the middle, so we're right between Cannon and Barton, not far from Wentworth. So that downtown area was full of wrestling fans. And I remember my neighbors a couple doors down, a native family. A lot of them, pretty much the bulk of them, are wrestling fans. And we're talking to a couple of them about it, and we were all excited that Bret was the champion. We couldn't believe it. And I'm thinking, my guy, he's the champion. I mean, Hogan was my guy too, but I'm like, Hogan was everybody's guy. Like, I don't know. I knew Bret was a lot of people's guy too, and I don't know. I thought he was mine. But anyway, so and I saw that that toy Intercontinental title that I got at Cops because he was holding it at the time. So as time goes on, they hype up a match on pay-per-view between Bret and Shawn Michaels for the championship. Yeah, even at 9 years old, I'm thinking to myself, is Shawn really a title contender? For some reason, I saw Bret in that light, but not Shawn. Maybe Bret because he had been the Intercontinental Champion on a couple of occasions. Maybe because I remember him as a tag team wrestler too. Maybe I just saw Bret as a bigger star. I'm like, oh, cool. But I was also looking forward to the tag match. It was going to be the Ultimate Maniacs against Ric Flair and a relative newcomer to the WWF named Razor Ramon. I hated Razor Ramon so much. I used to mock his accent all the time, little not knowing it wasn't real. Like, I remember on the playground during recess, I'd be like, say hello to Racer. Look at me, Ming. Look at my gold. I was doing it in like a mocking tone. I would say something, my gold, Ming. Not even real, Ming. So, yeah, I know. I was 9, people, okay? Keep that in mind. So, as time approached the Saturday Night's Main Event special, now I didn't know much about it until closer to the date of the show. Now, here's the thing with the Ultimate Maniacs, I have to say. Macho Man and Warrior. Even though Macho Man's promos were a lot better than Warrior's, they had that intense style that made them stand out. And sometimes Savage's promos, especially in WCW, if you fast forward it, were still great, but a little more nonsensical. So these two together was just a trip. Thing is, you only saw them work together on a handful of occasions, so you really can't estimate how far it would have gone. But in hindsight, when you look at WWF's numbers at this point, probably not very far. So watching Superstars, even I noticed that the last few episodes were getting a little, not dull, but just not as invigorating as others. I found myself easily distracted. That wasn't until the Halloween episode of Superstars that year in 92. And it's the episode I just did a watch along with my friend Mike Forte. Marty Jannetty returned. He had been gone pretty much since the barbershop window incident. So that was almost at that point. That would have been 9 months, so close to a year. Yokozuna debuted. Doink actually debuted, just roaming through the crowd. They hyped up the return of Bam Bam Bigelow. And there was a new tag team champions in a competitive tag match between now former champ The Natural Disasters versus Money Incorporated. Undertaker and Nails were engaging. If you didn't like, okay, I got to say this about that feud. When they're face to face, the crowd's standing. There was intrigue there. I'll say this over and over. The Nails character, say what you want about him in the ring, that was a good character. It's great. He looked like he was literally an ex-convict that had done something terrible to be in there. He fit the character. Now, I don't know how the matches between Taker and Nails were. I know there was a few, but yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So anyway, so that episode was just loaded with a lot of great stuff. So a couple of weeks later, you hear them hyping up on Superstars Saturday Night's Main Event. Now, I had small experiences watching Saturday Night's Main Event in the past. I had watched the last couple on NBC, and I'd watched the first one that aired on Fox just prior to WrestleMania 8. And then they said all titles are on the line. Vince was hyping it up for the evening. It was a Saturday on Superstars, so it would be on later that night. So you have, of course, a tag team title match between the Ultimate Maniacs and Money Inc. And right away, I got excited. I'm like, oh my god, I gotta see that. Money Inc.'s losing the titles. I didn't think there was any way they could beat Savage and Warrior. Intercontinental title match: British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels. Oh, I'm like thinking, yes, Michaels is gonna get his butt kicked. Ugh. So you can see my track record on this is not going well so far. And Bret Hart defending the title against Papa Shango. Now, I believe Papa Shango was a threat to the title at this point. As a 9-year-old kid and seeing what he'd done to the Warrior, I believed it. I don't know. I didn't think he was going to win. I still had faith in my boy Bret. But I just had a feel like, as a 9-year-old kid, Papa Shango was a threat to the title. Because he very rarely lost on TV that I'd seen. I'd seen him lose the Warrior at that taping, but that was a disqualification. The Warrior didn't pin him. So actually, yeah, at this point, I'd never seen Papa Shango lose to a pinfall or a submission at all. I think, oh, he's a real threat to Bret's title. Now, keep in mind, this is barely less than 2 weeks until the Survivor Series. So I run upstairs and I'm watching it in my basement. I say, Dad, Saturday night's main event is tonight. And he's just, I think, either reading a paper or watching something. He's like, yeah, I know, but don't forget we're going to Uncle Roy's tonight. Yeah, but we can watch it there, I said. And I'm like, well, no, because your uncle and I probably want to watch the hockey game. I'm like, don't get me wrong, I love hockey, but the Leafs. I don't know. I'm not sure if it was the Leafs or not, but it most likely was. No, actually, I think it was the Leafs and Bruins. Right, because I think that's what made me complain even further. I'm like, yes, that's right. They said it. I'm like, it's Toronto and Boston, teams we both hate. And my dad's like, well, we're in the same division as Boston. We got to hope they lose. I go, fair point. But I wanted to watch the show so bad. So what we had my mom do, because my mom was getting a visit from her best friend that night, because that's what her and her best friend Sylvia, she would come over and they just hang out while Dad was out for the night. Sometimes I'd be home, sometimes I'd be with Dad at one of my uncle's places. So I'm a little disappointed I'm not able to watch. At least I don't think I'm able to watch anyway. So the show starts, and my dad, because again he liked to taunt me a little bit back then. You know what I mean? So he puts the show on as it's beginning, and then right away switches back to the hockey game, which I'm like, come on. And then he got annoyed at me for being annoyed. So then he switches back, just in time as the Ultimate Maniacs are heading to the ring to face Money Incorporated. So there's my cousin Mike and I. Mike is only about 4 years old at this point, but he had just started getting into wrestling himself. And we're going nuts for Warrior and the Macho Man. And then they show Razor Ramon and Ric Flair backstage. And my dad, the buzzkill. Oh, you know they're going to interfere. I'm like, oh, come on. And of course, lo and behold, they did. I was really disappointed in that. So after that, they switched the channel again. At this point, they're just playing with my emotions. When my mom was even though my mom was taping the show for me, I wanted to watch it live because I knew as soon as I went home, I had to go to bed. I didn't want to wait till Sunday to watch it. But then they turned it back to it was the British Bulldog and Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title. Now here's the thing. This is why sometimes my dad would not blatantly make up or lie about stuff. He'd do that to taunt me sometimes. He had told me actually, and I forgot to mention this, about a couple weeks prior that Shawn Michaels was the Intercontinental Champion. I'm like, no, he's not. Why? Because I hadn't seen it on TV. Even though I'd been to a TV taping, pretty much learned how they worked, I still didn't believe it. Because they hadn't mentioned it on TV. Even though it had happened almost 3 weeks before this. It was taped in late October. We're in mid-November here. So I'm hoping the Bulldog's just going to power slam Shawn right to the mat. Or I was thinking, I nudged Mike. I said, Marty Jannetty came back a couple weeks ago. He might interfere. And even my dad stopped and thought, like, oh, that's actually possible. So then Marty's going to come out and cost Shawn the match. But again, my dad was taunting me because he knew what was happening. So the match was, I remember the match, I've seen it again recently. It was a really good match. For some reason, I mean, you can say they wanted their Beware of Dog match, that 96. There was a lot of circumstances that led to that not being so good. But otherwise, Shawn and Davey Boy always had really good chemistry. Shawn also was one of those guys, because again, the way he bumped and sold for guys like the size of the Bulldog made them look all that much more better. So we're watching the match. We're seeing Shawn trying to loosen the turnbuckle. So now it's going to come into play later, and we're right into this. Now, to be fair, they're letting us watch this match. It goes to a commercial, so they flip the channel back again. Then they flip it back right in time for the match to return. So they have that spot where the exposed turnbuckle comes up, the padding comes off, and Bulldog gets whipped right into it hard, and he is hurt. And then he tries to set Shawn up for a superplex shortly after. Shawn falls on him a 1, 2, 3. My mouth drops. Even Mike, who's 4 years old, his mouth drops. And look at my dad. My dad's got this big grin on his face. I told you he's the Intercontinental Champion. I'm like, but it just happened tonight. I'm thinking, again, I still hadn't learned from the TV taping I went to. I'm thinking this is live. I'm like, okay, Superstars and Wrestling Challenge, they're taped, but this is live. And my dad burst my bubble. No, this isn't live. This is just like the show we went to. It was taped. Like, oh. My dad's having a great time. He being all, I was a little upset that Bulldog had lost. And little did I know, seeing Warrior and Savage not win the tag titles, Bulldog loses their title. Warrior and Bulldog, they wouldn't even be on television a week following this. More on that a little later. So then, my dad again flips back. And I barely saw any of the main event between Bret Hart and Papa Shango. Saw bits and pieces of it. Of course, we get there in time to see Bret win the match. And I'm thinking, I really want to see that. I want to see Bret have a big successful title defense. Then we see the confrontation between Bret and Shawn backstage. I think I saw the tail end of the funeral parlor where Undertaker threatens Kamala, leading to their coffin match at Survivor Series 92. I didn't see the very end of the show, and that's going to come into play in a big way. So the next day, I watched the tape and to watch the stuff that I missed. I fast forwarded mainly through the first two matches because I'd seen all of it, really. Most of it anyway, the bulk of it, and I didn't want to see Bulldog lose again. So that upset me. In hindsight, it makes perfect sense for the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels main event to work, because other than SummerSlam 92, Bret hadn't main evented a pay-per-view. I don't think Shawn was in the main event of a Survivor Series. I think in '89 he was on Warriors team that closed out the show, but otherwise he hadn't been in a main event. So in hindsight, it makes sense. I didn't know it back then, but again, you have to build Shawn's credibility, of course, and putting the Intercontinental title on him does just that. And even as a kid, I'm thinking, okay, well now Shawn's the Intercontinental champion. He might be a threat to Bret. I thought that in the back of my head. He's going to be a threat to Bret now because he just won the Intercontinental title and beat the guy that Bret couldn't beat, Bulldog. I'm starting to figure it out a bit here. So as I pop in the tape, I watched the Bret Hart Papa Shango main event. And these two have been feuding on TV even for a little while at this point, a couple months, two maybe 3 months. And yeah, I think their feud just started just before SummerSlam 92. So I'm happy to see the whole match. I just wanted to see how Bret beat him because I was still curious. Saw the funeral parlor segment, which I thought was great because I love The Undertaker. And then the important part I missed, as Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan hosted the show. And Bobby made reference saying that Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage were no longer tagging up. I'm like, what? I didn't know, and I've done some research. It was 6 days prior to this show, actually, Warrior wrestled what would be his last match for close to, it was 3.5 years for the WWF. I also know Bulldog wouldn't be back for close to another 2 years. I would get a shock when I would watch WCW and see Bulldog pop up there a few months after this. And what is going on in my wrestling world? So again, I ran upstairs to my dad and said, Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man aren't teaming up at Survivor Series. Guess what my dad says? I know. Huh? It's like Ultimate Warrior's gone. He's been fired. I'm asking my dad, how does he know this stuff? And he goes saying my secret. I find out later it was a wrestling column in the weekend Toronto Sun newspaper he would always pick up from the store. So that's how he was getting all this information. Yeah, it sounds at this point, Dad's like a subscriber to Meltzer's newsletter, and he doesn't even know who Dave Meltzer is, I can assure you. So again, I'm watching Superstars, and I find out on Primetime Wrestling that Macho Man's new tag team partner is Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect had spent the last year as Ric Flair's executive consultant. Mr. Perfect had always been a bad guy, at least that I knew. And then I saw the segment from Primetime Wrestling, which I thought was great, when Perfect stood up to Bobby Heenan and dumped the water all over him. People say that this didn't make much sense, and they're probably right. But again, the big draw is Savage and Warrior teaming together. You got to put something in its place that the one guy is gone, the one big star is gone. That's going to make people go, wow. And to be fair, they did it. Mr. Perfect hadn't wrestled in well over a year due to his back issues. In the WWF, he had never been a babyface, a good guy. So I was actually intrigued by this. Mr. Perfect becoming Macho Man's tag team partner. I was really psyched for Survivor Series. So as you can see, the WWF was going under this whole crazy transition at this point. Think about it. In 1992 alone, Hogan has supposedly wrestled his last match. Warrior had made a triumphant return only to be gone half a year later. The Macho Man even was falling down the cards, even though he was, again, the Survivor Series match was still a marquee main event match. He had fallen down the card pretty significantly not long after this. It was already happening, little did I know. He was listening to Razor Ramon at house shows quite often. He was just a champion by the beginning of September. Ric Flair would be on his way out the door. Mr. Perfect coming back to the ring. This behemoth named Yokozuna debuting. People can say what they want about this era, but man alive was WWF trying to really instill a different product than we were used to with different talents. I mean, there were giant wrestlers around like Kamala and Earthquake, but something about Yokozuna. Just his look, that menacing look, that, the 505-pound at that time anyway, frame, and the way his every single move he hit. People go on to smart marks about how many moves a wrestler can hit. Yokozuna may have had 4 or 5 moves, but they all look like they hurt. I would cringe for pretty much his entire run every time he hit that leg drop, only to learn years later he never hurt anyone with it. Even that belly to belly of his. Incredible. What's that bonsai drop? He's sitting on someone's chest from the second rope. You never saw big men use the ropes very often. Kamala did it on occasion when he was, hitting splashes on, say, like The Undertaker. But again, finish? I never seen a big man use a finish like that. I was hooked. I was also hooked on this clown. I hated clowns. And I saw the way this clown was treating fans. So, of course, my dad, Mr. Know-It-All, reading the Toronto Sun articles, I asked him, is the clown going to be a wrestler? And he said, yeah. So the clown is supposed to be become part of the Rumble, which didn't happen. Doink was not in the Rumble, but I guess maybe that was a rumor flying around at the time. And Doink didn't have a name yet. So this all led to Survivor Series, which I didn't really plan on talking too much about, but you know what? I'll talk a bit about it. I remember that night was one of the first nights. I think it was the first time I was ever left at home alone for a pay-per-view. Now, before you get upset at my parents and call CAS 28 years later, to be clear, we lived in an open duplex. By that I mean, all we had to do was open the one door that led to our place, and the upstairs to the upper floor was right next to us. There was no door on the upper floor. We just opened our door, walk straight, turn left towards the stairs, walk up the stairs, and we were up there. It was an open area. My uncle lived there at that time. And, so we felt safe still. And my parents always tell me, if anything happens, just run upstairs to your uncle. Or even call him if I have to yell for him. Because we could hear it was loud enough. Somebody yelled loud enough. And my uncle, thankfully, would stay up late. Sometimes he'd be working night shifts, so by the time my parents got back, whatever movie they were going to see, he'd just be heading out to work. I was excited to be home alone for a pay-per-view. And during the pay-per-view, I would be mimicking the moves using the cushions on our couch. I remember even watching Tatanka and Rick Martel during that pay-per-view, and I would do like his fall-away Samoan drops, this fall-away slam, that's what they would call it. It was actually a Samoan drop. And Tatanka hit it magnificently. I'd be mimicking the tomahawk chops that he would do. I'd be like literally jumping off my couch and tomahawk chopping the couch cushion, the couch pillow even, that was set up against, that he's perched up against the coffee table. Picture it was Rick Martel. I would actually mimic, even though I didn't like him because he was a bad guy, but Yokozuna's bonsai drop, I would take the cushion, climb up to the top of my couch, and just plop my butt down right on that cushion, pretending it was Virgil. Well, then came the tag team match between, Macho Man and Mr. Perfect against Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. Now, again, I was excited for this. I want to see Mr. Perfect as a good guy. I remember the reaction he got was really good. The match itself, I thought was really exciting. This one, I didn't really mimic anything too much because I was right into it. Perfect kind of teased going heel again a little bit because it looked like he was about to walk away from the Macho Man, but went back. And they won by disqualification, shook hands. And even in my head again, like I said, they're painted into a corner. They had to do something. But it was kind of weird in the back of my head seeing Macho Man kind of embrace the guy who had pretty much cost him his championship not long before this, that had been hunting him down along with Flair for so long. But hey, it was great. I really enjoyed it. And I was looking forward to seeing what Mr. Perfect would do go forward. I was thinking at this point, WrestleMania, it's going to be him and Ric Flair. Yeah, my predictions were not very good at this point in my life, let's just say. I remember seeing the coffin match too, thinking between Undertaker and Kamala, and I'm thinking to myself, this is a very weird concept and even eerie for a guy who loves the Undertaker. I love the Undertaker, and I remember not cringing, but like just like jumping a little every time that nail, because that he after he pinned Kamala, he'd roll him into the coffin, put the lid on, and nail it shut, and I was like, whoa, like this is because I knew what a coffin meant. I may have been 9, but I wasn't oblivious to what death was. And I actually wonder, were we ever going to see Kamala again? I actually wondered that. So then came the main event later on. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Now the funny thing was I was mimicking moves from this one, but I was not taking my eyes off the screen. I thought now that Shawn was the Intercontinental Champion, that he beat the guy that Bret couldn't beat, that maybe he had a shot. Then Shawn had a whole new, I guess you could say, aura around him since he turned heel earlier in the year. Little did I know watching this at the time, I was seeing history, and here's why. These two guys, in a time where business wasn't great, in a time where people still looked at the WWF as the land of the giants, this would truly help set them on the road. Now, Bret already winning the title did this, mind you, but this would put them further on that road. It would accelerate, I guess you could will. Don't know what I just said there, but I just said something. It would accelerate them even further, I guess you could say, to change the game. Never had you seen two guys smaller in stature, but so high in skill in terms of how they wrestle when that bell rings in a WWF main event. Going forward, that became the norm. Sure, we had our Lex Lugers, we had our Diesels, but these two on this night, even if the pay-per-view numbers themselves weren't drawing as high as Hogan, they proved that night that they could put on a match in the main event of a major pay-per-view and truly give the fans something to remember, something to enjoy, something to get invested in. And they did just that. This match is highly underrated when it comes to the many in their catalog. And this kind of started it for them in many ways. So my parents got back actually literally just as the show was going off the air. Their timing was great. They come back. I was starting to get ready for bed because I had school the next day. I told my dad, of course, all about the event. That's what I would do. I would just go on a mile a minute about what happened. But before I went to bed, again, I asked my dad, I said, hey, you said Warrior was fired, but what about the British Bulldog? My dad admitted he hadn't heard anything about him. Then, of course, less than a week later, my dad, yeah, Bulldog's been fired. Like, wow. And of course, he popped up in WCW. Warrior, I did not see until his return in 96. I did briefly think he was the renegade, but like a lot of people did in 95 WCW. The reason why I want to talk about this era is because, again, this is an era where business is going down. Again, I'm the age I am at this time. I don't know this. Business is going down. Things are changing. Hogan is gone. Yeah, he would come back, but he wouldn't be back for too long. The days of Andre are gone. Andre would pass away shortly after this, sadly. Macho Man was, well, he'll forever have credibility. He wasn't being portrayed as a guy in the main event scene anymore. The Jake Robertses were gone. I knew wrestling was changing. Maybe the attendance, maybe the ratings didn't show that it was a good thing. But for this 9-year-old kid, I couldn't have been any happier with the way things were going. I was loving these new characters they were bringing in. I was loving Bret Hart being champion. I was loving the fact the Undertaker was slaying these giants. To an old smart mark, yeah, the wrestling's not so good at this point. But to me, in the comfort of my basement on Clyde Street, the comfort of my living room, wrestling with those couch cushions, I couldn't have been any happier. Even in hindsight, I look back at things and yeah, okay, some of that stuff did not age well. But hey, just you look through different eyes sometimes. But I could still see why I enjoyed all this stuff when I was younger. And some of it, you know what, is still good stuff. You can see that WWF was trying to make changes, changing their direction. Sure, occasionally Vince would try to go back. Like I said, putting the belt on Hogan again. Luger, the Luger push, Diesel. But still, times were changing, and I think, if I had to guess, again, I'm not one of those smart marks that thinks I know Vince, but if I had to guess, I think Vince knew that, but he was still trying I almost don't blame him for trying the formulas that gave him success in the past. You think it's always going to give you success because Hogan gave him that kind of revenue, that kind of drawing power for many years. So of course you think he could recapture it. But there came a time where Vince finally said, it's no longer just the big men that can sell my tickets anymore. I mean, with the way he loved Shawn Michaels, and no, I'm not insinuating anything there, like a lot of the conspiracy theorists. But clearly, again, that just goes to show you Vince's attitude was changing because he saw something so special in Shawn Michaels. Because he made Bret a champion multiple times. Vince may, okay, and again, don't take this too far into context. Vince may have had a hard-on for Shawn in some ways, and no, not that way, in terms of how much he loved him. But despite what people say, he loved Bret too. Maybe not towards the end, but he loved him. I don't think he would have made him champion all those times if he didn't. And now we see guys that size even smaller than Bret and Shawn winning championships, becoming stars. What a time it was to be a fan. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Next week, we are going to fast forward 3 years to In Your House for the Great White North. That's right, a pay-per-view that took place in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, October 22nd, 1995. The main event, it's a doozy. Big Daddy Cool Diesel defending his WWF Championship against, and I talked about a lot on this podcast, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. What else happened that night? I'm going to talk more about it in great detail, plus the amazing things that led up to that show. A lot of things happening both behind the scenes and on screen that WWF at that time. So lots to talk about. Cannot wait for that one. Have not done any shows from 1995 yet. So again, I am excited for that. So tune in next week. So until that time, this is Bill Chase, quoting a wise Hamiltonian, But I tell y'all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just say happy birthday and buy a meal and a cake for Rip Impact whenever you see him at a restaurant.